I'm going to speak a little bit to tell you about who I am and why I'm here and the cause for what I'm standing for. My name is Benny Warr. I'm a pastor also in Rochester, New York, of Interfaith Gospel Tabernacle. And I'm here today on behalf of my husband, Benny Warr. I've been with Benny for 34 years, all of my life, the same man in my life. And he was brutally beat and justified by the Rochester Police Department on May the 1st. What happened is that we're in a predominantly black area, and it was on May the 1st of this year, 2013. He was at a bus stop waiting on the bus going southbound, and just like Rosa Parks, he refused to be moved. They had asked him to clear the area because people were hanging out. He did not oppose or threat to anyone because he was not in front of no one's establishment, but he was waiting at the bus stop. At that time, another officer came up to him and asked him to move. He then replied, "I am standing waiting for the bus. I'm not doing nothing wrong." At that time, the officer said, "Didn't I tell you to use profound language?" and asked him to effing move. He said, "I refuse to move." Right about that time, one of the officers gently or slightly turned and began to mace him. You have to begin to realize that Benny has been a handicap all of his life. He was born with a deformity at birth. And so because of down through the years, because of his right leg has been deteriorating, he can only walk certain places and certain distances. So he's able and entitled by his doctor to have a wheelchair. While he was sitting there, the officer maced him in the face. And as he maced him, he put his hands up because he could not see. Right about that time, the officer that stood on his right-hand side tipped him over.
Oh my God.
In his wheelchair on his left side, which is his prosthetic side. After being on the ground, the officers then beat him, kicked him, stomped him numerous of times, countless times, while yet being on the ground. And he said some way, while being on his left side, he was able to ambulate to get off of his left side, which is his prosthesis. In the meantime, while this was taking place, a lady in a car was at the red light. She was a white lady, a Caucasian lady. She got out of her car because she had noticed the two officers standing there. And then she seen a man on the ground. She then went over and stood at my husband and asked him what could he do. At that time, she seen the officers 3 feet away, brutally kicking him in his head like he was nothing, and justified, like maliciously beating him, kicking him. And she asked him, she said, "Can I help you, sir, in any way?" Now you have to begin to realize there were black people standing around, but no one could get to him but this lady. And while she was there, she was recording. And she was recording, she had a recorder out. But in the meantime, while all this was taking place, there was another young lady that was recording the whole incident. It is on YouTube now, underneath Rochester Dirty AZZ Cop. And at that time, while he was yet still there, they did a few other, what you call a wrestling move, where his head was laid toward the ground. Another officer came and just elbowed him in the head. You can see that in the media on another footage that was also taken. At that time, and at this time, Benny had sustained broken ribs, contusions, neck problem, numbness, and at this time right now, due to the severity of him, he might not ever be able to wear his leg again.
It's all right, take your time.
I've been with him all of my life. I've never dealt with post-traumatic stress syndrome, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I then went to the doctor and said, "How can I help my husband?" A man that would go out and stand for anything now don't want to go and stand for everything. How do you deal with that? Psychologically, he's dealt with now not able to wear his leg again. That's a psychological. Right now, he's a diabetic also with he takes insulin 4 times a day, which his body has not been healed completely, and it's going on 2 months now. And so with this in mind, it called for some revolution. It called for some solutions. And so what I did is that a group in Amara journalism called In the Media, and I have to say and give all honor to God, amen, who is the head of my life. I have to thank ISO for being support for, amen, Benny Warr, which we reformed and have called now a base. Enough is enough. And out of enough is enough. Enough is enough! Enough is enough! And that's what we've done. We have gotten together with IOS, Center for Disability Rights, and some other organizations in the city of Rochester, and what we formed is Enough is Enough, where we have put on marches around the city. We have just completed one on yesterday, and I want to thank and praise God because it was a choice of me staying in Rochester, going to court with him, and they did charge him with disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. And now he is still going through charges now. And on yesterday, he called me and told me that the charges was not dropped. The DA did not even consider dropping them. We put a 440 motion in on May the 31st. My attorney did. And at this time, the judge just told us on yesterday was the first time he even looked at it. So with that in mind, we decided to do some solutions, some strategies. And out of Enough is Enough, the base for supporters, for people who are abused and don't know what to do or don't know how to go about doing it. We formed through ISO and through the other organizations how to come together. We give people an opportunity to speak out that wouldn't speak out. Prior to the same incident, 4 days before, my husband was beat by these same two officers. These same two officers beat a family member of 4, and continues to go on the brutality in Rochester Police Department. And so some of the strategies that we've done, we have gotten petitions together, and we come up with 5 points. We just didn't organize or strategize some things. We came together with some movement. We come together with some points to try to be effective in what we're doing. And what we did, we came up with some demands to support Benny Warr to denounce police brutality. And what we demanded was to drop the charges against them, which they have not done as of yet, but that's still okay. Number 2, we're talking about firing the officers involved with the attack, and also bringing them up on charges.
Yes.
Okay. Number 3, the Rochester Police Department publicly apologizing to Benny, which probably would never happen, but that's another point of demand that we are recommending and hoping to get. Number 4, clearly the policy and procedures of how to retain or how the officer or to be restrained and or retrained and how to deal with people of disability, not just in this case, for other cases. And you have to begin to realize that if you take a man in a wheelchair that has done no wrong and brutally attack him, what do you think they'll do to anybody else? I've also learned through the Disability Rights Center in Rochester that they also have a place where people that are deaf, they take their hands and cuff them behind their back, so it keeps them from enabling to talk or to do any sign languages. Yes, it's just that bad. We don't realize it. And so what we're asking and what we're doing is getting some 5 points. The last point that we have discussed is the end racial profiling and criminalization of neighborhoods of colors and zip codes. That's another point that we're suggesting. And by doing this, we have done petitions. We have walked. We've been to public markets. We've gone all over. It's on the internet. I'm going to give you some information. When you leave here, you can look it up, how we're going about strategizing some things. And you have to begin to realize it's not going to happen overnight. But when we can continue to push, continue to believe, continue to receive, we're going to be able to accomplish some of these barriers. And we also realize that in doing this, that we have gotten together unity. We've got people that are coming out, and just on last Thursday, another gentleman was beat so bad by the police department by 7. It was caught on tape where he was just getting his daughter. She was an innocent bystander. You know how kids get when there's an altercation or something going on. And he went to go and get his daughter. She wasn't in the altercation, but she was standing there. And by him going to get her, he was beat so bad. It was caught on camera also. And we're working with that family when we get back on Monday to do just what they did for Benny, that we're going to do for them, the marches, showing them that they have rights, giving them, hope that, you know what, it's not the end, but people are afraid, people are scared to speak out and talk. It's a silent death almost, because of the fear and the things that might come up against them. And then right now we also had petitions where we took to the mayor's office, we took them to the DA's office, saying that these are some of the things and demands that we are expecting and respecting to do in this situation. Now, where do we go from here? This is a strategy, and I want to thank, like I said, Rem, Anna, the whole ISO of Rochester, New York, for giving me a chance and opportunity to come here today. It wasn't only about my husband, it wasn't only about the brutality that he had attained, but we're talking about a society where they're not even respecting handicaps, they're not respecting disability anymore. They're not respecting the blind or the deaf. So you know what, as we go and as iOS begin to think on some of the things that they're strategizing as far as police brutality, I want you to consider some of these things that has gone up and some of these things that we're dealing with all over. And whichever way that we can help or strategize to come together, anyone have any suggestions or anything of that nature, we're asking you to come about. So what we did is that we came together and we came up with these 5 points by everyone strategizing and coming together, looking at what was the most important, what is going to be our next step. If we have to sit now, we're talking about action move. And I've been sitting in the meetings and I'm hearing, but what happened to the action? What happened? I was just telling my brother here from LA that the NAACP president is also the deputy sheriff in Rochester, New York. Yes, about 6 days after this incident had happened. And I listened to Jack today. He don't even know what he really realized what he said, but he said a lot to me while I was sitting back there. I didn't even know him, but he was like, what happened to the churches? What happened to our community? What happened to that civil rights movement where churches weren't just getting out there? And he said something because of Oscar Grant. He said the people are getting grants. And when he was talking about that, churches are not coming out because they're getting funding government money. Exactly. And that gives them a chance, opportunity to be secluded and to doing what they can do. I have never had fundings like that. I haven't got any fundings like that. Because I have not gotten anything of that nature. So I'm saying to iOS, ISO, OSI, all of the above, I just want to thank an opportunity to say, you know what, just keep us in the movement. Like I said, Rochester, New York, the video is shown on YouTube, in the media. Also, Rochester Dirty AZZ Cop. There's also a page about Benny Warr that you can go and look into see some of the other things, other comments, other things that are taking place in our community. So when you guys are strategizing and some things, anything that you can help me with, anything that you can give me would be greatly appreciated. And I thank you for all.
I'm sorry, the reason I want to go second because I didn't want to go behind her and then go behind her. And I believe you set me up because it goes to show like it doesn't matter, like don't judge people because you're sitting by them or you don't know them and you're sitting right by them and you don't know their story, and then next thing you know she's up here speaking dynamically and you're like, damn, I gotta go behind her. She was. And earlier she kept telling me, get up and speak, get up and speak. You should have been speaking. And you're a leader, and Rochester, New York, they better watch out.
That's right.
Wow, I've just been having a great weekend. I've been meeting like people from all over the United States, different backgrounds, like different cultures. I don't even know how to say it, but the I embraced them, they embraced me, just like, and it showed me that I can't discriminate against nobody. Because if you discriminate against anybody, it's still the same thing. It hurts. You know? So I just want to thank everyone for embracing me, and I embrace people. Like, I wouldn't be here or who I am today, or Oscar Grant wouldn't be where it is today if it wasn't for the community. And so, like, I've got to thank the community. I've got to thank Francois. I didn't even know this guy. And I wouldn't even, like, growing up, I wouldn't, like, my friends are saying, Jack, you're turning weird. Because your friends you're hanging around with aren't like the guys you grew up with. But my friends aren't activists. I'm an activist now. Not that I say I'm not, but I've been kind of forced into that. But I don't mind. But Francois is my friend. I consider the friend for life. I'll take him to the grave. And if it wasn't for the ISO, there wouldn't be no Oscar Grant or Ramarley Graham, or there wouldn't be no Alan Bluford. And a guy I really lean on in the Bay Area is my man Todd right there. So, you know, he helps me out. And the reason I do fight is because stories that I hear, and it builds up anger in me, and it just determines me to fight. And this guy has been like, I don't know how he does it, but he shows no anger, but I love this guy. and you know, he keeps me in my place, and he's a mentor. He's someone that like, and this dude just speaks, and I couldn't imagine like any young man that's in jail that's done from a teenager and he's done 28 years and come out as humble as he is. He's a good dude, and Mark Clemens right here. A reason why I am an activist is because I ignored it for so many years. Like, long as it didn't happen to me, I was cool with it, or it didn't happen to my family. You know, I don't want to be bothered with it. But I had friends that were killed by police officers. I had friends that were killed black on black, brown on brown, and I ignored it. But then when it hit my home, then it was different. But I always heard this story and growing up. And the young man was 14 years old. His name was Emmett Till.
That's right.
I remember my son's lawyer, John Burris, told me he was a kid growing up, and when Emmett Till was killed, he said all black young men, whenever they seen white men, they would just run because they were scared. They didn't want to happen to what happened to Emmett Till to happen to them. And it just, he said when his mother put the casket out, it just put the fear in all black young men to, like, I don't know, just to bow down to white men. But his mother didn't bow down to white men, and she had white folks, and she put that casket out there for the world to see. And it's an honor. When I go back to California, I could say, you know, man, I know Emmett Till's family.
Yes, yes.
Like, this guy, he's just vocal all over, and that's another reason why I'm an activist. I kind of want to be like him, but I can't be like him. But the guy's like the Muhammad Ali of the activist world, jazz.
Yeah.
I don't want to say your age, but you say you're 72, but damn, you get around real good. and you keep it moving, and I'm not going to say how old I am, but I'm like, I can't even keep up with you. But you're doing great work in New York, and New York really needs it. You know? And so we're here to talk about strategy, you know, and I'm going to be honest about it. It's one thing. Being an activist, trying to challenge this capitalist system that's been doing this for 400 years to, you know, I can't speak on it, but I know it's been done 400 years. I'm not religious, but I study and I read, but we talk about 400 years. And when, to the religious people, and I don't know how the clergy can't come around and support against police brutality or what's going on in our community, and they say that they're very religious and God this, God that. But one of the greatest men on earth, Jesus Christ, he was thrown in his court system. And the same court system that betrayed the Ramadi Grahams, the Oscar Grants, the Rodney Kings, betrayed Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ, I want the clergy to know, you need to support us because the man you praise and you tell us to pray to was killed and tortured by this system. So there's no way you cannot. What happened to Oscar Grant, what happened to Ramadi Graham, Sean Bell, happened to Jesus Christ, but it was 400 years ago. So that's why the clergy, they should think about it, and they really got to get involved with it. Like I said earlier, we're asking, like Martin Luther King, what would you be doing right now? This man gave up his life. He sacrificed his life. And to see what is going on now, I know he has to be thinking about, damn, why did I give up my life when people aren't fighting the way I fight? You know, and it's amazing to me, like, he was trying to strategize. He started talking about police brutality. He was talking about the things we're talking about. Still, people say, oh, there has been a change. I don't see the change. You know, people say, oh, we changed. We got a black president. Okay, well, we got a black president. What's amazing is that George Bush, what he was doing, he was called the racist. Obama's doing the same thing. Obama can say, when I look at Trayvon Martin, could look at my son. Okay, Mr. Obama, you felt comfortable, and LeBron James, Oprah Winfrey. I'm not taking nothing away from Trayvon Martin. I feel bad that he got killed, but Trayvon Martin wasn't killed by a police officer. And so when you can't say, you could say Trayvon Martin is like your son, but what about Ramoni Graham? What about Oscar Grant? What about Sean Bell? You don't want to speak against them because you don't want to speak against the powers that be that protect you in these kind of decisions. What bothers me is when I see everyone running around with these t-shirts, Obama crazy. When you're on a t-shirt with Frederick Douglass, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and they got you in the front, it's ridiculous. They would have spoken out about what happened to Sean Bell or this prison system. That's what they did. Frederick Douglass, I would have gave my life to sit at a table with Frederick Douglass and one of them, man, John Brown. And it wouldn't be no Frederick Douglass or John Brown if it wasn't for a woman named Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman led this coalition. And that's what the blueprint has been there for us on how to organize. It's been set. Why are we ignoring what John Brown and Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass done? Why are we ignoring what happened to Medgar Evans, Emmett Till, like I said earlier, Jesus Christ? The blueprint has been set for us. And we should be following that. And if we follow it, because it hasn't changed. Last year, police officers around the United States have killed 393 young, mostly black men and women, and brown, but mostly black. 393. And then what's amazing, it's not, I hate to say the word amazing, but it's crazy how George Bush, especially Obama, when they say we have to protect America from the Muslims, from the people in the Middle East. Okay, and then we're on code orange, high alert, close the Brooklyn Bridge, close the BART trains. But
he's still getting in.
And
shut down Boston.
The thing is, I don't see no Muslims going around killing people in the United States.
That's right.
Yes.
What I do see is the police officers going around. Young men and women, like from where I come, they don't fear. Like the fear factor is like when the police pull you over. Why do people run? Because if you see a bully on the block, you're gonna run.
That's right. That's right.
If you're gonna see the leader of a gang on the block and he's coming for you, you're gonna run. So that's the same thing with the police. They rather you got to take that chance. People say don't run, but why stay there and get killed?
Exactly.
Or it doesn't discriminate. Right. Her husband was in a wheelchair. He's disabled. Ayanna Jones, a 7-year-old young girl in Detroit, shot in the head twice by a police officer. Nothing has been done.
Wow.
Ramoni Graham killed in front of his grandmother and his little brother. Just murders by police officers all over the United States. So that's why it's so important. And we shouldn't just take this it's beautiful that we're all here today and man, everyone's in high spirits and but then what happens on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday?
Everybody goes back to their life.
Everybody goes back to their regular life. But what happens Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? There's young men being killed by police officers. There's young men that are what happened to Emmett Till. There's young men and women all over the world that are being treated like Mark Clemens was. Police brutality just doesn't come in a form of police killing somebody. Police brutality comes in what happened to Mark Clemens. His life was stolen for 28 years, and he'll never get those 28 years back of his life. Those must have been like nightmares to him, and you'll never get those years back. So police brutality comes in all types of form and fashion. Even like when one night my son called me and said, "Dad, I just got pulled over by the police." And I'm like, "I just got pulled over by the police." But we're on two different sides of the town. So you take a father on one side of the town and a son on the other side, and we're both being pulled over, and we're asked the same questions. What gang do you belong to? What prison did you come out of? I gotta say, fuck you, I work for the government. I hate to say it, but I work for the government. I have a job. So don't assume just because the way I look, stereotype me that I belong to some gang or I just got out of prison. No, I've been working for the last 14 years for the government. So those are things we're up against. That's why what we have to do is we have to strategize. I mean, we're all brilliant, we're all great, we're all here to, to do something. And it's going to take time, but sooner or later it's going to happen. Like the attention Trayvon Martin is getting in Florida, we should be fighting for Marty Graham in New York to get that attention. CNN, why isn't Fox Network? Why aren't these people talking about Richard Hayes who killed Marty Graham in cold blood? Why aren't they reporting every move that these police officers, that's being done? But we got our admirer Constance, Malcolm. She's a fighter, and she's doing it, and she's not backing down. And we need to get behind her, no matter where we're at. We need Facebook, we need to do everything. Just like they did for Trayvon, we should be doing for Marty. We should be on the computer. We should be writing letters. We should make them and hold them accountable for what they did to Marty Graham. And then if we do that, then there won't be no more Marty Grahams or Oscar Grant or Sean Bell. Because this is going on and on and on. And I feel bad. Forgive me, I can't name everybody. It's been so many. But we have them in Los Angeles. He just mentioned Kelly Thomas. Kelly Thomas was a white young man that was beaten by six sheriffs. And everyone's saying, why was he hollering daddy? Why was he hollering daddy? Because his father was a sergeant on the sheriff's department. Am I right? Yeah. And his father was the one that was in charge of the young men that beat his son to death. So how low can you go when you're beating one of your colleagues' sons to death, and then nothing happens? And so that's why I'm saying it's so important to strategize. And we should be listening to what Christopher Dorner said. Everyone remember who Christopher Dorner is? The police officer in Los Angeles. I mean, what if he would have reached out to the ISO? What if he would have reached out to someone? And he would have became one of the most powerful activists that could have existed, because everything he was saying in his manifest is what we stand up and fight for. So we have to make those connections. I don't know who we're doing while they're police officers. You never know. But but all I want to say is, like, I could go on and on and on and on. But because of the way we organized in Oakland, California, I said it earlier, there was a district attorney named Tom Orloff. Tom Orloff was the DA for Oakland for 30 years. Tom Orloff is the one that tried to destroy the Black Panthers along with J. Edgar Hoover. Tom Orloff is the one that tried to put Huey Newton away for 3 times and couldn't get him convicted of murder. But after 30 years later, there was a young man named Oscar Grant that was murdered. The community stood up and fought. The same man that tried to destroy the Black Panthers and lock Huey Newton up, the community that stood up for Oscar Grant got him fired and made him resign. And that's the type of life. So like I said, I want to thank the community. I want to thank especially the ISO, because when Oscar was first murdered, ISO campaigned to end the death penalty. Other organizations made sure I was able to spread this word and bring light to Oscar Grant. And I'm not bragging about it, but I'm just saying, Forrest Whitaker wrote a movie about Oscar Grant. It's coming out. It's called Fruitvale Station. But the disappointing part about it is Hollywood is claiming it, but they're not talking about the activists that made it happen. There would be no Oscar Grant, and there would be no movie if it wasn't for everyone in this room that stands up and does something. Like Jazz. I mean, I admire you at your age. You're looking at 14 years. I couldn't do it. But you did it because that's something you believe in. Erica, you're still fighting for. Here we are, 40, and you're still fighting for Emmett Till. You're keeping him. Mark, you're doing the work. Todd, Francois, I don't know everyone's name. You're doing it. Everyone is just. I just want to thank everybody. And I don't know if I made my point, but I just. Thank you, and I love you. And once Che Guevara, I think it was Che Guevara, I'm pretty sure it was him that said it. It's better to stand on your feet. Am I right, Todd? It's better to stand on your feet than live on your knees. So this is something, I don't want to die, but this is something I would die for. I would sacrifice myself for, because it's something I believe in, and it's something that's going to make a change. So I thank you, and I love you, and I appreciate it.
I'm really glad there's so many people here today. I don't know, Jack, you were all worried about being, speaking. Everyone seems to be,
I hope so.
thought you did a great job. I'm inspired. So I don't want to be the one that's, I just think it's like, since it's a meeting about strategy, it's worth actually talking about some of the real obstacles to what we're doing. And I think that that's come out of a lot of what you just said. And I think that I'm not going to speak too long, but I know there's a lot of people in this room that have been doing police brutality work, that it would be really good to sort of hear your own experiences and other struggles, against school closings, etc. So I'm going to talk for a little bit, but then I want us to definitely open up this conversation so we can talk about what everyone's doing here. I wanted to start actually with Angel Perez. I don't know if people know the case, but he just filed a lawsuit against the Chicago Police Department because 6 officers sodomized him with a gun because he basically refused to sell heroin for them in a sting. And this is what the police officer said to him to scare him. And basically, before they used this gun, they said that they would pull down his pants, and that they said, "I want you to know what," and I apologize for saying this, "a big black nigger dick likes a gun up your ass." That's who these people are.
Yeah.
And I know you all just spoke to it,
Yeah.
but they're animals.
Yeah.
And and they intimidate people and shame them. And it's what we're up against. But it did remind me of another case that actually gives me hope. And that's the case of Abner Louima. Abner Louima was a Haitian born resident of East Flatbush, Brooklyn. He was arrested by the NYPD while outside a Flatbush nightclub. En route to the station, Louima was beaten in a squad car. Once he arrived at the 70th Precinct station, 4 officers pinned him down, sodomized him with the handle of a toilet plunger, then forced the handle in his mouth, breaking his teeth and causing massive internal injuries. The response, on the other hand, was Haitian American Alliance, which was a group that was very big and prominent at the time. Haitian Enforcement Against Racism was rooted inside of Flatbush, as a largely Haitian community, organized a day of outrage against police brutality and harassment. A 20,000 strong march, against the 70th Precinct, which was known infamously, police officers spoke about the 70th Precinct as the 7-0, for its tough approach towards residents that it policed. The HAA, the Haitian American Alliance, and the Haitian Enforcement Against Racism, along with 12 other political and social groups, and I'm talking about mass political groups like the NAACP, came together to organize a mass march of thousands, over the Brooklyn Bridge to City Hall. The march was endorsed by the city's most influential Black Democratic politicians, Mayor David Dinkins, the former mayor right before Giuliani, who was the mayor at the time, Congressman Charles Rangel Parham, who's still a congressman right now, Reverend Al Sharpton, who frankly made the man that we know today out of fighting police brutality struggles, Abner Louima being one of those examples, and then Amadou Diallo. And along with other victims of police brutality and the family of Abner Louima. And 2 women who stand out that people should know and read more about if they can, Margarita Rosario and Iris Baez. They actually formed a group called Parents Against Police Brutality, which does some really heroic stuff. But thousands of protesters, they marched over the Brooklyn Bridge. They held toilet plungers, and you could see them bobbing up and down as their bearers chanted Brutality. And they passed 2,500 officers that were there that day. And a student from Queens College said, "The plunger may become a symbol of oppression for Haitians, much as in the same way a lynching rope has become a symbol of oppression to Southern Blacks." That's sort of like the environment to which the response was to Abner Louima. Today, we are again seeing an enormous increase in police violence against the poor and working class African American communities across the country. Last year in New York, there were 21 people killed by New York City police officers, up from 13 the year before. And again, we are seeing the beginnings of an anti-police brutality movement. Constance and Malcolm, who you spoke of, in New York, who after losing their 18-year-old son, Ramarley, organized vigils, 18 of them, for the next 18 days on a Thursday night after he was killed that brought out hundreds. Activists called it sort of like the Zuccotti Park of anti-racist struggle here in New York City when it happened. This happened in last February.
Justin Volpe's still in prison. Justin Volpe with Abner Louima incident.
He's still in prison.
Yeah, where he belongs.
Yes, absolutely.
Not Chuck Schumer.
And Constance and Frank have built a network and inspired other people against police brutality. And they won an indictment for the first time since 2006 against the police officer who did it, Richard Hayes. I just want to talk a little about the NYPD. They've become under immense political scrutiny. I mean, this is a police force that basically sets the standard for all police departments across the country for stop and frisk. And political pressure from civil rights activists and grassroots groups have exposed the department's policy. And they've actually created the conditions where a federal class action lawsuit is just finished, the Floyd versus the City of New York, based on statistics and a movement that said 87% of last year's 685,000 stops were either African American and Latino men in the city. Okay, 0.2% of the cases, though, guns were found, and over 90% of the time, Black or Latino males stopped were completely innocent of a crime. For years, the city's mayor, right, billionaire Michael Bloomberg, and his police commissioner, Ray Kelly, have credited the policy with the city's historically low crime rates. According to the mayor, the strategy we know saves lives. That's what he says, okay? And it finds guns. Well, 0.2% of the guns, notwithstanding that little statistic. And in response to, I mean, there's the pressure that in response to, this policy from the, because of it, from activist groups, it led to a stop and frisk rally of 15,000 people in New York City. And it was organized by the NAACP, it was organized by the same civil rights organizations that were part of the Day of Outrage in '97. And the march was the first kind, of its years, but it also highlighted the police brutality, the weaknesses of that movement. And that is unlike the police brutality of the movement of the 1990s, these broader civil rights forces don't give the same time and resources to the day-to-day organizing against police brutality. And unfortunately, this has made the organizing of our current campaigns really difficult and challenging. And for the families that have begun to step forward, right, and lead these emergent struggles, which is incredibly courageous, the work falls on them to do it. And I think that that's made things very hard. And the activists that are still there. And I think this is limited in many ways, as I know we were talking yesterday, Jeff. This sort of has limited our ability to get to wider and wider layers of people. And it means doing this work being very hard and difficult and challenging. And, we also have to consider the effects of the war on drugs, okay, and over the past 30 years, especially broader civil rights organizations that have struggled because of the war on drugs and the attack on the radical black left. They used to be part of these struggles. And with the rise in mass incarceration, speaking out and organizing within the unorganized Black and Latino community, who experience the worst effects of the criminal justice system, also provides challenges. This is in addition to the daily struggles associated with unemployment, access to social services, often relied upon most in communities of color. Okay. What we do know is that police will kill again, right? And that we can guarantee. But given this context, how we organize really matters. And what we say about police brutality and the strategy for organizing ourselves also matters. Because we also need a political strategy that can assist in navigating the terrain that we're talking about. For example, there's a case of Kamani Gray in East Flatbush. East Flatbush, I don't know if people know about that case. Okay. In East Flatbush, where I actually been working on a campaign for a while there of Shantel Davis, who's a 23-year-old woman who was killed by Philip Atkins, who's a police officer there, who actually has a reputation as Bad Boy Atkins for his actual the way he stop and frisks people in the community. Just incidentally, when we were fighting around this case, and the story was getting out, and the DA at the time was getting a lot of pressure, he sort of said to us, well, we'll let you guys find your witnesses. So the family and the other activists are actually going around door to door, knocking on doors for the DA to find witnesses. And not surprisingly, when we were talking to people, they all knew who he was. And there were about 50 people that were outside that day and watched as they killed Shantel. No one wanted to talk to us. You know, it was hard. And this is like this is how they are and how they act in these communities. The response to Kamani, though, I think sort of symbolizes what can sort of happen, the volatility associated with the police brutality movement. So after, Gray was killed, okay, he was shot 7 times, this young man, he was shot at 11 times, and 7 of the times it hit him. He was shot because he adjusted his waist belt, okay? And it was assumed, we were told, that he had a gun. And he apparently, rightly, was approached by 2 undercover police officers and started to run. And what they said was that he turned around and he fired the gun that he had in his hand at him. Okay, 7 of those shots hit him, 3 in the back, which kind of debunks the idea that he actually was facing them. And then what happens is they then put a picture of the actual gun out there, the police, and it's like a Colt 95, something like something you see out of a Western. It's just like clearly planted evidence, okay? And then the witness testimonies start coming forward about who saw what and what was there. And there was no gun. And there's actually horrific stories of a witness that was testifying how he was on the ground begging for his life, holding his stomach and saying, it's burning, it's burning, it's burning, please stop, please stop. These are sort of the testimonies. This time, though, these testimonies that came out for witnesses and people that, the response in the street was that it exploded. The neighborhood, literally, there were hundreds of people that came out night after night after night in response to this killing. Actually, one night they claimed it was a riot. They were throwing things at the cops, of course, bottles at the cops. They were taking, all the different metal barriers that the cops put in place, throwing them to the side. I'm sorry, and they were really, protesting what that reality, what it was like to be living in East Flatbush, and the response that the police had to this case for literally over a week. There was an occupation of East Flatbush in response to this. There were probably 200, 300 cops out every night. That's not even saying the 4 or 5 helicopters that were, literally flying over us. At his wake, there were police officers, probably like 12 different police officers on mounted horses outside of the wake, which had over 1,000 people that came through that day. And outside of the actual funeral, they were on rooftops, and they were looking down at the family as they brought in the casket. Okay, complete and utter intimidation. And down the street, though, there's this 15 blocks away, Shantel Davis was killed, the woman I just had mentioned. And we've actually formed a committee that was in place at the time. There was a place for people that were really angry at obviously what had happened to Kimani. 2 minutes, Jesus. Angry at what happened to Kimani. They were able to be a place where activists and people that were angry could come to and actually talk about organizing. But that committee in itself had its own weaknesses. It didn't have those broader forces that I was talking about. That weren't in the room, and that meant that we weren't as effective. So on the one hand, there's huge rage, there's huge outbursts of frustration, and there's organization around certain individual cases, but those cases only go so far. And I think that there's a lot that we're up against, and I think that one of those things that we're up against that, has to be taken into account is that they actually have an ideological hold on a lot of the things we have to deal with. There's one activist in response to the Kamani Gray killing. She talked about activists. This one reporter said this about, what we were up against. The activists are up against not just the police, but also the very logic that normalizes police violence and permits the public to rationalize black deaths. Kimani has been smeared as a blood and a gangster, as though this is an unsubstantiated fact that would make it okay his unprovoked death happen at the hands of the state. And that's something that's really important. I think we need to challenge this logic, and that means exposing the lies of the NYPD and Gray and all the other police officers, while also defending any and all black youth, including gang members, against the harassment and racism of police departments. And that has shown utter disregard for the lives of black people. We also need to challenge those who try to turn the focus to black on black crime, while ignoring the particular role that the police play in reinforcing the status quo, in which working class blacks suffer higher unemployment, greater poverty, worse public schools, and a dearth of public services. Violence within the community, which is always brought up as a reason why we have cops in these communities, is a product of material deprivations, whereas police violence is designed to reinforce those deprivations, right? And keep residents in fear of organizing and speaking out. And I think that those are the things, that sort of argument is something we also need to take on, because it affects the police brutality movement. In New York, a lot of the activists' response to these recent rashes of killings, what they did is they went around to different corners up in different areas, were the areas that actually had the most violence, and they had, it was called Occupy the Hood. And their strategy was, let's talk to black men who we know are gang members and try to tell them not to shoot other black men. To pull up their pants and find a different, be more respectable. And that was the response. And it was unfortunate. But at the same time, there's another way in which we can fight, and that's what we have to insert our way of doing things. We have to focus it on the system, not on each other, and actually take on the arguments about police violence, and that, it's not right to criminalize black youth, because that's politics of fear that they use to justify why they're on our streets. And those issues we don't take the time to actually bring up enough in our coalitions and in our committees. Those arguments that we need to be saying to people when we're talking to them on the street, because it's unfortunate we don't have these broader, organizations that are involved. Clearly, it's not impossible. We should be having responses to the killings that we see that are like Louima's response. And that's possible. We have to understand where we're at, and that from there we have to build on it. Because we don't want the anger and frustration that came out of Kamani Gray's killing to actually not go anywhere. Because there's a difference between organized anger and unorganized anger. And organized anger is what we need. And that's just not holding meetings, that's talking politics and strategy and thinking through how we take on what it is they put out there and their justifications, in particular around gun violence. And I guess that's all I want to say. And I feel like everyone in this room, we should talk about how we make that happen in your experience.